When you're photographing subjects on a table, like an ornament or perhaps a drink, it's very easy to find yourself pointing the camera down at them, looking at them from above, and that can produce quite a nice perspective, but sometimes it's nicer to go for an alternative, perhaps more surprising angle. So when you're taking pictures of objects on a table, like an ornament or a drink perhaps, it's very easy to find yourself looking down at them from above. You're seeing the top of the cup or the top of the ornament here, which is okay, especially if the table's a nice shape or pattern. But sometimes it's nice to go for a different perspective, where you're at the bottom looking up. In this case, what I want to do is get the camera really low and look up at the subject. But with me seated here, that's very difficult. What I'd normally have to do is actually crouch down on the floor and get those cameras in the phone as close to the table surface as possible. But there's an alternative and much easier trick you can do by simply turning the phone upside down. Now the camera on the phone is at the bottom, looking up at the subject for a much more dramatic perspective. It makes it look a lot more heroic. But it also means that the background is more of the ceiling than of the table, so we can see some different things. The first thing I'm going to do is tap the subject to focus and expose for it, and now you can really see the window and these lights in the background, and by just sliding the phone from side to side, see how I can adjust the position of the lights in the background in relation to this subject in the foreground. And then when that looks good, just tap that subject again to make sure that it is sharp, and then take your shot. Right, I reckon I've got some good ones. Let's see what I've got. This first shot is typical of taking a photo of a subject on a table. I'm looking down at it from a slightly higher position. It could work well for a cup of coffee, perhaps with some latte art in it where you want to see the top of it, but it's just that typical perspective where you see the table and what's immediately behind it. What I really want to achieve is something that looks a bit different. For this shot, I've turned the phone upside down so that the camera is closest to the surface of the table, and this means that I've had to angle it to look up at the pot. And you can see already that this perspective is much more dramatic. And by focusing on the subject, it's also allowed me to blur these lights in the background, which of course weren't visible when I was pointing down at it. But now that I'm pointing up, we can see more of the ceiling. I quite like the window that's behind the vase here, but I don't really like that I can't see what's in it. I want to actually know more about that. For this shot, I've kept the phone upside down, so again the camera is still at the level of the table looking upwards, but I've moved back a little bit in order to make the vase not only smaller but to see more of what's inside it. Now repositioning it has meant that I've missed out on the window that was to the side, but it's meant that I can capture two of the ceiling lights, so I've positioned the vase roughly between them for a bit more balance. And I think altogether as a whole, this shot works best of all.